Welcome to Creepy Night, where shadows speak and stories never truly die. Tonight, we open another tale, one whispered through fog, born of fear, and written in blood. So, turn off the lights and listen.
The coach had long since disappeared into the shrouded distance when Elias Thorne, wrapped in his threadbare cloak against the chill, finally spied the first signs of the village. Blackwater Hollow lay sprawled beneath a canopy of rotting oaks, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky as if to keep the storm at bay. The air smelled of damp earth and something fouler, a hidden rot that clung to the cobblestones like a whispered memory. He had come to the hollow under the guise of scholarly curiosity, a historian drawn to the tales of its cursed past. Yet already he felt a creeping hesitation, a sense that his arrival had been long expected. The path leading into the village was narrow and winding, bordered by the blackened remains of hedgerows, and the fog that clung to the riverbank curled and swirled with an unnatural deliberateness. As he approached, the murmurs of the river, shallow, relentless, almost sentient, seemed to carry voices not entirely human. The houses were of timber and stone, leaning at awkward angles, their windows shuttered or broken. Some bore the remnants of painted signs, now faded and curling, that spoke of trades long since abandoned. A blacksmith's hammer still rested on the anvil, and a wheel lay half buried in mud, suggesting a life abruptly interrupted. There were no children playing in the lanes, no dogs yapping at strangers. Only the hollow echo of Elias's own footsteps filled the void. At the village's center, a modest inn offered the faintest sign of habitation. Its lanterns swung in the windless night, casting uncertain light upon the stone walls. The innkeeper, a stooped man with eyes as gray as the surrounding fog, regarded Elias with something akin to recognition, though Elias was certain they had never met. "Welcome to Blackwater Hollow," the man rasped, his voice a dry leaf skittering across the stones. "Few come willingly, fewer still leave." Elias managed a polite nod. "I am a scholar," he said. "I intend to study the village, its history, the legends. I mean no disturbance." The innkeeper's lips twisted, half into a smile, half into a grimace. "History, legends, truths buried with the dead, some say. You'll find the hollow does not suffer prying eyes kindly." Wow! A chill ran through Elias. The inn's threshold seemed to swallow him, the smell of damp wood and pipe smoke mingling with a faint tang of decay. The common room was dim, furnished with heavy oaken tables and chairs, worn smooth by generations of use. In the corner, a fireplace smoldered with gray ashes, casting flickering shadows that danced like grotesque sentinels along the wall. No other patrons were present, though Elias suspected he was not entirely alone. The hairs on his neck bristled, and when he turned, a shadow in the far corner seemed to shift, retreating with the subtlety of a predator. After supper, a modest plate of thick broth and coarse bread, Elias retired to the inn's chamber. The window faced the river, now a silver ribbon in the mist. Through it, He could hear the subtle murmur of water over stone, and beneath it, the faintest whispering, as though the hollow itself spoke in its own private tongue. Sleep was reluctant to come. In the small hours, he thought he saw figures walking the riverbank, tall, in distinct shapes that paused at intervals, turning as if aware of his gaze. Yet when he roused himself fully, they vanished, leaving only the quiet sighing of the fog. In the morning, Elias ventured further into the village. He noted the peculiarities of Blackwater Hollow: doors without latches, windows barred not for safety, but to keep out light, an absence of livestock, yet traces of recent footprints in mud. The pervasive feeling of being watched. Villagers avoided his eyes, muttering under their breath as he passed. One old woman, leaning on a crooked cane, whispered a single word: "Leave." "Ah!" He questioned the villagers politely about the curse, though few would speak openly. Those who did offered fragmented tales of vanishings, of fogs that swallowed men whole, of shadows that licked the edges of vision. Every story hinted at the same dreadful truth: no one left Blackwater Hollow unscathed. And yet, a stubborn fascination took hold of Elias. Each warning, each whispered tale, drew him further into the heart of the village, like a moth to a dim, flickering flame. By evening, the fog had returned in earnest, thick and curling, swallowing the village in a near impenetrable white. Lanterns glimmered dimly along the streets, but even their light seemed hesitant, as though reluctant to pierce the encroaching gloom. From somewhere within the fog, a bell tolled, low and sonorous, reverberating in a manner that made Elias's chest tighten. There was no church in view. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. He found himself standing at the edge of the river, where the water gleamed silver beneath the moonlight. The surface rippled as if something beneath had stirred, and in it he saw fleeting reflections of figures, faces, hands, eyes, not his own. He blinked, and they were gone. Yet the feeling of being observed remained, pressing upon him with an invisible weight. Night after night, the same pattern repeated. The fog thickened, the whispers grew bolder, and the shadows seemed to follow him even indoors. In his dreams, the village stretched infinitely, houses opening into impossible alleys and stairways that led downward into cold stone. The river ran backwards, carrying with it the faces of the lost. He awoke gasping, drenched in sweat, certain that the hollow was already entwining itself around his mind, just as it had claimed countless others before him. By the week's end, he discovered an old map in the inn's common room, faded and frayed, indicating hidden pathways through the woods and the ruins of a chapel long claimed by the river. Marginal notes in spidery handwriting warned of the fog that watches and the river that remembered. Elias's curiosity became obsession. Every turn of phrase, every suggestion of secret, fanned the embers of his scholarly ambition into a consuming flame. He could not leave. He could not resist. And yet, the hollow was patient. It waited, silent as stone, letting him wander its fog-choked streets and whispering corridors. It allowed him the illusion of exploration, even as the village's presence pressed closer, entwining with his senses, until the very air seemed alive with expectation. Blackwater Hollow did not merely exist. It breathed, watched, and waited. By the end of his first week, Elias realized a simple truth whispered in the hushed tones of frightened villagers. The Hollow did not merely confine its residents. It consumed the curious, the inquisitive, those who sought too deeply. Those who sought too deep. And as he lay awake one night, staring into the shifting patterns of fog across the window pane, he understood, with both dread and a grim fascination, that he had already crossed the threshold. Oh, Blackwater Hollow had taken note of him, and it would not relinquish him willingly. The fog rose like a living thing that evening, curling through the crooked streets of Blackwater Hollow with deliberate intent. It moved not with the whim of the wind, but with a subtle intelligence, seeping under doorways, winding through alleys, and gathering in the corners of Elias Thorne's chamber at the inn. He pressed his hand to the cold glass, staring into the thick silver swirls, feeling the air itself heavy with whispers he could almost, but never fully, comprehend. The first of the voices came from the river. At twilight, when the waters reflected the dimming sky, a sibilant murmur rose with the mist. At first, Elias thought it the current, lapping over stones with the usual soft cadence. But then the murmurs sharpened into fragments of words. Elias, Elias. His pulse quickened. No one else could have known his name. That night, sleep proved impossible. Lying in the narrow bed, he could hear the whispers more clearly, drifting through the room like smoke. Some were urgent, others mocking, but all were inhumanly patient. Shadows pressed against the walls, as if listening along with him. He dared not move, for fear that the fog outside, thick as wool, might seize him if he were noticed. By morning, Elias was pale and hollow-eyed, yet compelled to venture out. He wandered along the riverbank, where the fog hovered just above the water, transforming the familiar village into a labyrinth of silver and shadow. The banks were slick with mud, and footprints marked his path, but he noticed something unsettling. The prints behind him were not quite his own. They were smaller, lighter, as though a child or an unseen watcher had walked exactly where he had tread. At the far end of the bank, a figure lingered among the reeds. When Elias drew closer, it vanished. Yet, in the water's mirror, he glimpsed the faintest trace of it. A thin, hunched shape with eyes gleaming like coals. It disappeared when he blinked, but the echo of its presence remained, prickling the skin at the nape of his neck. Returning to the village, Elias attempted to question the inhabitants further. Most avoided his gaze entirely, offering only curt nods or shaking their heads. One woman, whose face was partially hidden beneath a tattered bonnet, whispered urgently, "Do not follow the fog. It sees, it knows. It will claim you as it did the others." Elias persisted, drawn by a compulsion he neither understood nor wished to resist. He explored the narrow lanes, the crumbling chapel, and the half-collapsed cottages whose interiors smelled of mildew and decay. In the chapel, He found pews blackened by rot and walls scored with strange sigils carved deep into the stone. Some resembled letters, others forms more sinister, twisting, spiraling shapes that seemed to shift when one glanced away. As night fell, the fog returned thicker than ever. Elias felt the weight of it in his chest, a pressing, almost tangible presence. The whispers grew louder, closer. They seemed to circle him, sometimes behind his ears, sometimes directly in front. A voice, soft, feminine, and impossibly sad, called his name from the direction of the woods. Elias, come. Compelled, he followed. The path led him beyond the last cottage, into the trees whose branches arched overhead like cathedral vault. Fog wrapped around his legs, wet and cold, yet yielding, as if inviting him forward. He reached a clearing, where moonlight filtered through the canopy in pallid shafts, illuminating the twisted remains of an ancient well. The well seemed ordinary at first, yet when he peered into its depths, the water reflected not the sky but the village as it might have been, pristine and bustling, children laughing, smoke curling from chimneys. Then the scene shifted, windows broken, doors ajar, empty streets. Faces appeared in the reflection, pale and desperate. Mouths open in silent screams. Among them, a figure raised its hand, Elias's own hand. He stumbled backward, heart hammering. The whispers multiplied, surrounding him now from all directions, voices overlapping. Stay, see, follow, become. The forest was alive with them, echoing endlessly. He realized the truth with a shock. The hollow itself had a memory. It remembered every visitor, every curiosity, every act of trespass. It could show the past, the future, and all that was trapped between. Racing back to the village, Elias found the streets altered. Paths he had walked that afternoon now twisted unnaturally. Buildings that had seemed familiar loomed larger, some impossibly tall, others crouched unnaturally close. Every turn revealed a shadow in the fog, each one darting just beyond his sight. When he paused, the whispers would settle into a single cohesive voice. You cannot leave, not yet. The hollow knows you. In his chamber at the inn, Elias sought refuge, though the fog had followed him. The window, which had framed the moon and river, now framed a gray, formless swirl. Shadows moved within, as if the fog itself were liquid and sentient. That night, sleep did not come. He wrote feverishly in his journal, recording every sound, every whisper, every vision, as if the act of writing might preserve his sanity. Yet even as his pen scratched across the paper, he felt the village watching, reading over his shoulder, testing his resolve. The days merged into nights. The fog became his companion, his tormentor. He began to recognize patterns in its movements, curling around corners, retreating for a moment, then returning with deliberate patience. Figures materialized, then dissipated, leaving behind only a sense of absence. A hollow where reality once existed. The villager's words rang clearer now. Curiosity was danger. Knowledge was the bait. and Elias, they implied, had taken it eagerly. By the end of the second week, Elias's reflection in mirrors grew faint, blurred, as though the hollow were erasing him from existence. His pulse thinned, his hands trembled, yet he could not turn away. Each whisper, each subtle movement in the fog, beckoned him further into its secret heart. And there, in the deepest hours of one unending night, the fog parted for a moment. He glimpsed a figure, clearer than any before, tall, cloaked, with eyes that gleamed with the hollow patience of the hollow itself. It raised a hand in invitation or command. The whispers swelled into a chorus. Come, see. No. Become. Elias stepped forward, unable to resist. And as he did, a terrible realization struck him with crystalline clarity. The hollow was patient, eternal, and insatiable. It fed on curiosity, it thrived on obsession, and now it had marked him. To leave Blackwater Hollow would be impossible, not because of distance, not because of fear, but because the village itself had claimed him, weaving his presence into its fog, his essence into its whispers. And in that moment, Elias understood the terrible truth that every scholar, traveler, and fool before him had come to know. Blackwater Hollow did not merely imprison bodies. It consumed minds, hearts, and souls. It was alive, and it had chosen him. The days in Blackwater Hollow began to lose their distinction, merging into one long, fog-choked continuum. Elias Thorne, once a man of rational study and careful observation, found his logic fraying at the edges. The village pressed upon him, insidious and patient, coaxing him deeper into its labyrinthine streets and whispering corridors. It was during one such day, when the fog lay thick as wool upon the river, that he stumbled upon the first of the hollow's hidden secret. A gap between two cottages revealed a narrow stairway descending beneath the village. The entrance was almost imperceptible, obscured by overgrown vines and a layer of sodden leaves. Compelled by equal measures of fear and fascination, Elias lit a lantern and began his descent. The stairs were slick with moss and mud, each step echoing into the blackness below, as if announcing his intrusion to some unseen audience. The stairway ended in a tunnel, its walls hewn from damp stone. The air was thick and fetid, carrying the metallic tang of old blood and the faint, lingering smoke of long-extinguished fires. As he moved forward, the lantern cast long, tremulous shadows that danced upon the walls in grotesque imitation of light. The tunnel curved and forked in ways that seemed unnatural, stretching beyond the limits of memory and reason. He marked his progress with chalk, yet found upon returning later that some markings had shifted, or perhaps vanished entirely. Elias discovered rooms hidden beneath the village, crypts, storage chambers, abandoned cottages that had been swallowed by the earth. Some contained coffins cracked and dry-rotted. Others, shelves of brittle tomes and scrolls written in languages forgotten by all but the most arcane scholars. In these subterranean halls, he found evidence of the Hollow's long history, records of disappearances, documents of curses and ritual implements, rusted but unmistakable. One diary, its leather cover worn through centuries, recounted the fate of a traveler who had dared to map the village's secret passages. His writings ended abruptly, smeared with ink, and what Elias could not bear to imagine. The more he explored, the clearer it became. Blackwater Hollow was alive, not merely in the superficial sense of weathered stone and lichen, but as a sentient entity, preserving its own memory, shaping its streets, and above all, ensnaring those who sought to know it too well. The fog, he realized, was its sentinel. The tunnels beneath the village were arteries through which the hollow extended its reach. By the third night of his subterranean excursions, Elias had lost track of time. His chamber at the inn became a repository for maps, journals, and sketches, all detailing the labyrinthine pathways he had discovered. Yet the fog intruded even there, curling beneath the door, pressing against the windows, carrying with it the same voices that had first called him from the riverbank. Sometimes they whispered warnings, sometimes mockery, sometimes the faint, irresistible melody of promise. Knowledge beyond imagining. If only he dared continue. The villagers, whom he had once attempted to question, now avoided him entirely. Even the innkeeper's cryptic warnings had ceased, replaced by silence that screamed in its intensity. And Elias, for all his rational mind, felt the beginnings of an unbearable compulsion. He could not stop. The secrets of the hollow demanded to be revealed, and with each revelation, the village's hold on him tightened. One evening, following the faint glow of phosphorescent moss in a long-forgotten corridor, Elias entered a chamber that seemed entirely separate from time. Its walls were lined with alcoves, each containing remnants of the village's lost. The skeletal remains of children, the desiccated forms of adults, all arranged in a meticulous, almost reverential fashion. In the center of the room was a basin of stagnant water reflecting a scene that should not have been. The village as it once was, alive with laughter, warmth, and sun. Yet, as Elias leaned closer, the reflection shifted. The river ran black, the streets were silent, and the faces of the villagers stared at him with hollow eyes, mouths open in eternal cries. It was here that he realized the true horror of Blackwater Hollow. It did not merely consume the living, it preserved them, distorted them, and made them part of its eternal memory. Each soul became an echo in the fog, a shadow in the streets, a whisper along the riverbank. And now, by trespassing deeper into its secrets, Elias had become part of this grotesque collection. He began to see the village differently. Doorways appeared where none should exist. Alleys bent impossibly. Rooftops seemed to tilt at unnatural angles. And the fog moved with deliberate intent, curling around corners to reveal, or conceal, passages he had never noticed. Mirrors in the inn reflected not his own face, but fleeting glimpses of others. Travelers lost to the hollow, their eyes wide with fear and recognition. Sleep became impossible